Well, it's so good to be here this morning and appreciate the presence of all. We've got, as was mentioned, there are a number who are out sick. There are several who are traveling today, but all of you are here, and I welcome you and appreciate you, and it's good to have those who are visiting with us, and we're hopeful that you can come back and be with us again in the future. I want to make mention this evening at 4:30, we are going to be having the children's Bible drill, which will primarily the young men lead singing. I know because of this being Father's Day, there may be some that will not be able to be here at 4:30, but hopefully with the number of children we have now, we'll still have enough to have a good class. And so I'm saying that, one, for parents with children, but also if you are not young, you don't have children, but you want to come and encourage these young fellas in their song leading, come on and be a part of that at 4:30. In Ephesians 6 and verse 2, it says, honor your father and mother, which is the first commandment with promise. The scripture would tell us to honor father and mother. I mean, it just seems appropriate that our nation would set aside a day each year to honor mothers in May, a day to honor fathers in June, and really, those are things that ought to happen all year round. But the days our nation has set aside as Mother's Day, Father's Day, every year they fall on a Sunday. And Sunday is first and foremost the Lord's Day. And I don't ever want to turn our worship service into, we're just going to celebrate Mother's Day, we're going to celebrate Father's Day, and forget the Lord. But I oftentimes, because the Lord has said so much about parents, I may use the occasion to remind us of what the Lord says, to honor Him by thinking of what He says. And today I want to do things a little differently than maybe I have in the past. And I'll call this Father Abraham. Some of you learned a song about him when you were younger. I didn't. But so I just have heard it a time or two. But in Romans, the 4th chapter, in verse 11, Paul refers to Abraham as the father of all who believe. And he's making the point there. He's not just the father of the Jews, the circumcision, but he's the father of the uncircumcision, of the Gentiles. He's the father of all who believe. And what I want to do this morning is look at the life of Abraham and three qualities in Abraham that I think make him worthy of note, and three things that as fathers you ought to want to emulate. But I want to say to you, if you're not a father, you can be male or female, you can be single or married, you can be childless or have the quiver full. This is a lesson that I think ought to have much application to everyone. There may be a point or two, a little part that is really honed in on fathers, but I think all of this lesson will be for all of us. We're just kind of taking special application to fathers. Three things. Abraham, of course, as you know the story, was called by God as, somewhere before the age of 75 to leave his homeland. His homeland was in a city called Ur, which today would be the country of Iraq. He migrated from there to Haran. And then after his father died, God took him into the land of Canaan. And there in the land of Canaan, in places that we today would, some of it would be part of Israel, some of it part of the Palestinian territories, God told Abraham, who by the time he reached Canaan was 75, married but childless. He said, I'm going to make out of you a great nation. And he said, I'm going to give that nation this land of Canaan. And then, of course, when we think about how he became the father of all who believe, he said, ultimately, through your seed, all the nations of the earth would be blessed. And Abraham would live to be 175, become the father of Isaac, who would be the father of Jacob. And Jacob's name was also called Israel. And Israel became the father of 12 sons, the tribes of Israel. But what about Abraham made him special? Well, one of the things about him was he put God before family ties. You know, on the day that we're reflecting on family, I think it's important we start out, he put God before family ties. Joshua, the 24th chapter. Now, this is about 600 years after Abraham comes to the land of Canaan. And Israel has entered the land of Canaan that God had promised to Abraham's descendants. And the land's been dispersed among the 12 tribes. And Joshua is nearing death. And he says to the people, verse 2, "Thus says the Lord God of Israel, your fathers, including Terah, the father of Abraham and the father of Nahor, dwelt on the other side of the river in old times, and they served other gods. Then I took your father Abraham from the other side of the river, led him throughout all the land of Canaan, and multiplied his descendants, and gave him Isaac." There's a lot there that I'd like to know that I'm not told about. But I look at the family background of Abraham. A man who, from the first time he's mentioned to us, which is in Genesis 11, and then the story really picks up in chapter 12, he's following the Lord. He's building altars to the Lord. But what was his background? It said, your fathers, including Terah, the father of Abraham, served other gods. Abraham went against family tradition in choosing to serve the Lord. And then in Genesis, the 22nd chapter, you've got one of the best known incidents from the life of Abraham. Now it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, "Abraham." And he said, "Here I am." Then he said, "Take now your son, your only son Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah, and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains of which I shall tell you." So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey, and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son. And he split the wood for the burnt offering, and arose and went to the place of which God had told him. A number of years have passed. Abraham was 100 before Isaac was born, so he'd been in the land of Canaan 25 years. Isaac is now old enough that if we continued with the story, we would see him carrying the wood up the mountain. He said, "You love your son, but I want you to love me more. Take him and offer him on the altar." In Hebrews, the 11th chapter, this is one of the incidents that the Hebrew writer cites as proof of Abraham's faith in God. Verse 17, "By faith Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac. And he who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said, 'In Isaac your seed shall be called,' concluding that God was able to raise him up even from the dead, from which he also received him in a figurative sense." He obeyed God. He obeyed God over parental tradition, over the love he would have had for his child. And I think it's significant to take note. God said, "You take Isaac, whom you love." As if Abraham didn't know that. But God just wanted to make, I know you love him. You take him and you offer him as a sacrifice. And there's so many lessons for us today, for fathers and for all of us. Many of us were blessed with godly parents who taught us the ways of righteousness, and we can be thankful for that. But not all. Some of you have had to make the choice already. Are you going to follow family tradition? Are you going to follow the Lord? Jesus is very clear to us in passages like Matthew, the 10th chapter. that as great as the love for family is, it can't supersede our love for God. Verse 34, do not think that I came to bring peace on earth. I did not come to bring peace, but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. And a man's enemies will be those of his own household. He who loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me. And he who loves son or daughter more than me is not worthy of me. And he who does not take his cross and follow after me is not worthy of me. Father or mother, son or daughter? He said, no, I am to be first. In Luke, the 14th chapter, he uses even stronger language when he says in verse 26, and this is at a time when great multitudes are with him. If anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, in his own life also, he cannot be my disciple. He doesn't want us to literally hate, but he uses that word because that's a word that gets our attention. That's a word that drives home the fact that he is first, foremost, he is supreme above all. And we have to sometimes make that choice. Even sometimes with Christian parents. There come times when they may err doctrinally. They may err in some moral thing. Sometimes they go in the wrong path. Sometimes there are issues that arise and we have to stand against a parent. And that's not easy. But Abraham did. And we're going to talk about training our children in a moment. But we've got to love God more than children. We love our children. I believe we ought to love them no matter what they do. But we are not good parents if we excuse their conduct. Sometimes I've seen as children would grow older and grow into maturity, parents want to protect them from the discipline of the church. Typically, in a lot of the cases in schools, they tried to protect them from ever being disciplined by the school. But they'll try everything to keep the church from doing what 1 Corinthians 5 says, 2 Thessalonians 3. I think about Adonijah sometimes. David was feeble near the end of his life, and what was probably the oldest son remaining, Adonijah, he got him some horsemen and he started acting like a king. Well, David had said, Solomon is to be my successor. And Solomon was probably much younger. The Lord had said Solomon. But Adonijah, he's acting like he's going to be the next king. And it makes the point in 1 Kings 1 and verse 5 that David had never at any time rebuked him or said, why are you doing this? Adonijah was a grown man. But the implication is the father should have said something. He didn't. Family mattered to Abraham. Don't ever miss that. Whom you love. But God mattered more. And that's the way it's got to be with us. I want you to turn to Genesis 18. And, of course, the whole story of Genesis 18 is fascinating in that this is when God appears to Abraham. He's already told him in the 17th chapter, you're going to have a son. And Abraham's attitude is, well, I got a son. I took my wife's servant, Hagar, and we had a son. And God's attitude is, I promised you a son when your only wife was Sarai. And you and Sarai are going to have a son. And so he visits him again in chapter 18. And he comes, says, as three men. I think it's clear These are angels. And tells them that he and Sarah will have a son. You remember Sarah laughs and is rebuked. But then two of the men, angels, went on towards Sodom. Because in the 19th chapter, Sodom will be destroyed. But one stayed and talked with Abraham. In verse 17, this one, he speaks for the Lord. And the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am doing? Since Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. For I have known him in order that he may command his children and his household after him, that they keep the way of the Lord to do righteousness and justice, that the Lord may bring to Abraham what he has spoken to him. And he said, I have this relationship with Abraham, so therefore he reveals to him what's going to happen to Sodom. They start the negotiation and for what would it take to spare Sodom. But I want you to take note of verse 19. I have known him in order that he may command his children and his household after him. He said, I picked a man. And I think the idea is, he said, I know he will do this. That I chose him with the expectation that he would command his children, his household after him. And we're not told a whole lot about the parenting of Abraham. But I'm going to trust that God made the right choice when he said, I've known Abraham in order that he would do this. And isn't it interesting that he uses the word, he will command his children and his household after him? Can we really command anyone to obey God? Can we demand it and force it? Obviously not. And yet, he uses this word as it's a strong word, like when he said, hate your father and mother. It's a word of great emphasis. You lay it on them. You tell them, you must do this. You can't make it happen, but you can teach them. And that's the pattern of the Old Testament. Look at Deuteronomy, the 6th chapter. I know we're familiar with this text, but I want to avoid sometimes the trap of saying, well, everybody knows this text, we don't need to read it. Sometimes it's the case we do know it and we can just refer to it. And sometimes maybe we don't all know it. And then sometimes, even though we know it, we need to be reminded of it. Verse 4, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. We know this is the first and great commandment of the law. And then he says, and these words which I command you today shall be in your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk of them when you sit in your house, when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise up. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes. You shall write them on the doorpost of your house and on your gates. You teach these things. They must be important to you, and you must teach them. In Proverbs, the 6th chapter, it's in the middle of a lengthy section that focuses on warning his son against adultery. That's the entire 5th chapter. He does some other things in the beginning of the 1st chapter. Then he comes back in the middle of the 6th chapter and going through the 7th chapter and says, my son, stay away from adultery. But notice this in verse 20. My son, keep your father's command and do not forsake the law of your mother. Bind them continually upon your heart. Tie them around your neck. When you roam, they will lead you. When you sleep, they will keep you. And when you awake, they will speak with you. The expectation was that his son knew the father had tried to teach him. The mother had tried to teach him. if he would just do what he had been told, these would be guides to him. They would keep him from trouble. We need to be able to say to our children, if you will keep the law of your father, the commandment of your mother, it'll be a safe guide to you. And the only way that we can do that is that we do what is said in the New Testament. In Ephesians 6 and verse 4, and you fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath, but bring them up in the training and admonition of the Lord. What will keep them? Well, most parents have a lot of wisdom and knowledge about a lot of subjects. And a lot of that's important to pass along. But what will guide them and keep them is the knowledge of God, of God's law, of God's ways. And we've got to make sure we do that. Make sure in the teaching of your children, as you command your children in your household, that you put first things first. You know, there's a lot that goes on in the lives of our children. They have school. They may be involved in the arts and music and athletics. And each of those things has a place in the life and the development of our children. And in fact, can help with their spiritual development. In school, they teach you to read. That's a very important skill if you want to follow God, to be able to read His Word. Sometimes in school they teach critical thinking, the ability to analyze things. That's good. You know, schools may teach music. People may, outside of school, go to music classes. Well, that can help someone be a better song leader, can help us all be better in congregational singing. You know, such things as athletics. Sometimes maybe teaches people how to work as part of a team, which is important in the church. There's value, but that's not what's most important. What's most important is knowing God. It's loving God and loving neighbor. It's knowing this book. And I want to encourage all fathers, use the principle of Deuteronomy 6. Use that example. It says when you sit down, or you lie down, when you rise up, when you're going in, when you're going out. And I don't take Deuteronomy 6 to mean that every word that ever came out of a father's mouth was about God. But he's saying that it's not just, well, we have this Bible study time. That's good. But we also, we're riding along and we see some of the beauty around us. And we talk about creation. We're in the store and we see some conduct that is unbecoming. And we take advantage of that opportunity to talk to our children about how Christians don't dress like that. Christians don't talk the way that person just talked to the cashier. There are these opportunities. Take advantage of those. Utilize those. Take advantage of our Bible classes. As a church, we want to offer the best classes we can. And I want to strongly encourage all teachers, take your job seriously. Work at it. And then parents, bring your children prepared. Bring them. That's important. They've got to be here. But don't rely on them as the sole thing. They're not charged with bringing your children up in the training and admonition of the Lord. That's your responsibility. Let's be like Abraham and strive to be the father of faithful ones. And then set an example of faith. In Romans, the 4th chapter, verse 12, in this chapter, in its context, is talking about faith. Abraham was justified not by the works of the law, because he was the friend of God long before the law was given. He was pleasing to God before he ever entered into the covenant of circumcision. It talks about his faith. But this expression in verse 12 is very important. He said he's the father of circumcision to those who not only are of the circumcision, but who also walk in the steps of the faith which our father Abraham had while still uncircumcised. His faith walked. It did. Walk in his steps. Steps of faith and trust in God. And when we think about the word faith, it's believing in, it's trusting in someone. And I want you to turn to Hebrews 11 and verse 8. This is one of those that I just didn't notice it when I was a little younger. But as I got older, it really hit me. By faith, Abraham, verse 8, by faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out not knowing where he was going. He didn't know where he was going. God says, I want you to leave Ur. And I don't know if he told him that, initially, your first stop will be Haran, or he just said, head north. He didn't know where he was going. But he knew God had told him to go. So he left. And he set out on this journey. He didn't know how it would all turn out. And then he was called, he was obedient. His faith led him to obey when called to do something difficult. In Genesis 17, when God appeared to him and said, not Ishmael, but you'll have a son, Isaac. And he instituted the covenant of circumcision. At 99 years old, Abraham would undergo that physical pain. But that couldn't compare to what he did in chapter 22, when he set out on a 3-day journey, knowing that at the completion of that journey, he would have to kill his child. But Abraham did it. Abraham did that. If you want your children to be obedient children, if you want them to come to know Jesus, Hebrews 5, 8, and 9 says that he's the author of eternal salvation to all who obey him. What father doesn't want his children to go to heaven? I just can't imagine a father that could look you in the eye and say, I hope my children burn in an everlasting hell. Now fathers don't want that. But in order to avoid that, we need to teach. And if we want to teach them to be obedient, to Jesus, then we ourselves need to be obedient. We need to, someday, sometimes it just doesn't, I don't know how it's going to work out. How's all this going to play out? Matthew 6:33, in that great passage on don't worry about your food, your clothing. Don't worry about tomorrow. Tomorrow it'll worry about its own self. He said, seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Our children need to grow up in homes not homes that make no plans. That's not what Jesus is saying. But in homes where parents put their faith in God and they're going to obey God even when they're uncertain of what the future may hold. They don't know how life's going to turn out. But they're going to follow God. That's the kind of home. 1 Peter 1 talks about those disciples going through fiery trials. And he spoke of how they even rejoiced in their faith during that. That's an example our children need to see in us. Sometimes, as I was talking earlier about God over family, sometimes we have to make some tough choices. And it may not relate to family, it may relate to other things. What God asks of us in his word, it's not always easy. And particularly because most people are not doing God's will. But what will our children see in us? Will they see us make the right choice, even if it's the tough choice? When you study the life of Abraham, he wasn't perfect. But there are some things said in Hebrews 11 that really speak to why he is held out as such a hero of faith. Go back with me to Hebrews 11 and verse 8. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he dwelt in the land of promise, as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. While he was alive, he never inherited the land of Canaan. They dwelt in tents. They moved from place to place. But he was looking for that city that has foundations. And look at verse 13. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have had opportunity to return. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Why did Abraham continue to live in a tent in a land that was not his? Because Canaan wasn't what it was all about anyway. It was all about that heavenly city. Abraham was a hero of faith. Abraham is the father of all those who believed, because Abraham looked to the city whose builder and maker is God. In the New Testament, in Colossians 3, we are challenged to set our mind on things above. If then you are raised with Christ, seek those things which are above, where Christ is, sitting at the right hand of God. Set your mind on things above, not on things on the earth. For you died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is our life, appears, then you also will appear with him in glory. I think the majority of us here today, including those I'm especially targeting today, the fathers, would say, yes, that's me. My focus is on heaven, going there myself, taking my children there. And I want to offer to us, it's very easy for us to think that that's what our goal is, our priority is. But the world has a way of crowding in on us. Jesus in Luke 8:14 would talk about the cares, the riches, the pleasures of life that would choke out the word. I mean, you think about things we have to do, like our jobs. Sometimes taking care of our family. Things that I fully am persuaded we have the right to do, permission to do. Our hobbies, interest in current events, entertainment. All of these things are either necessary or at least permissible. But if we're not careful, they begin to eat up too much of our life. And suddenly, I haven't forgotten about heaven, but I'm really more concerned about my job. You know, on my mind, I'm thinking about Jesus. But boy, college football is coming up, and it begins to be too much. We got to make sure of our focus. It's not always an either or, but it's where the emphasis is. What's most important? The people that Peter wrote to They continued to live in those various portions of what we today would call Turkey. But he told them to live as strangers and pilgrims. He told them to live as though they were exiles. We have to live our lives out on this earth. We live as Americans. We live as sports fans. We live as employees, as students, whatever it may be. But let's make sure that we realize that's all secondary. That what really matters, what's most important, is seeking those things which are above, where Christ is. That our lives be hidden with Christ in God. We want to teach our children. We want to command them to follow God. But it won't matter how skilled we are at teaching, how many hours we devote to it. If our lives don't reflect a love for God, a commitment to Him, and we will all be imperfect at that. And maybe one of the most important things our children can ever hear from us will be admissions of imperfection and apologies and statements of seeking to correct our mistakes. But if they don't see in us a commitment, our teaching is likely to be ineffectual. Let's be like Abraham and let's look to the eternal city. Abraham teaches us what? Choose God over family. He instructs us to, you should be in that word there, instruct our children in the way of righteousness. He teaches us to set the proper example of faith. Let's learn from him. Let's be more like him. Now, I want to close with a reading from Galatians 3. And after we read this, we're going to be singing the song for your encouragement. This tells us how we become children of Abraham and of God. For you're all sons of God through faith in Christ Jesus. For as many of you as were baptized into Christ have put on Christ. There is neither Greek nor Jew, there is neither slave nor free, there is neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus. And if you are Christ, then you are Abraham's seed and heirs according to the promise. If you would be baptized into Christ, he's the seed of Abraham. But when you're baptized into Christ, you put on Christ. And you too become the seed of Abraham, the heir of the promise. If you would do that this morning, we'd be glad to help you. Come as we stand and sing together. Thank you for watching this video. We're glad that you have found our channel. And in fact, while you're here, we would encourage you to subscribe to the Jones Road Church of Christ channel. We have several videos already up, and we believe you'll find these to be true to God's Word, helpful to you in your journey toward God. And if you have any questions, please reach out to us and let us know how we can help you.